Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I hope you hear me. Let me introduce myself. I'm Yulia Nikitina. I am Associate Professor at the World Politics Department, MGIMO University, and I also work at the Center for the Post-Soviet Studies, also here in MGIMO. And our today's lecture will be devoted to regional organizations and security arrangement in the Black Sea region. I have a PowerPoint presentation that I will forward to all the participants afterwards, and you will be able to access it and have all the pictures and all the definitions that I give. I would like to start from the discussion of peace in the Black Sea region, because usually we discuss security issues from the point of view of threats of regional organizations. So we start from something negative. I guess that it would be a nice start to discuss peace as something positive. That's what we will start from. And I suggest to discuss results of the project called Global Peace Index. This Global Peace Index is developed by Institute for Economics and Peace. This is a non-profit, non-government organization. The methodology is that they have 22 indicators, quantitative and qualitative. And these indicators include a number of external and internal conflicts fought by the countries, relations with neighboring countries, level of perceived criminality in society, political instability, level of respect for human rights, number of police and security officers, military expenditure as a percentage of GDP, exports of conventional arms, nuclear weapons, etc. And on the website of this project, you can see the global map with the results for different countries. And I suggest to look at the Black Sea region, and I will now show you a picture that I cut from their map. So I hope you can see it. So now I will move it. I'm not sure if you can clearly see this map. This is a state of security in the Black Sea region. And as you can see, the level of security in Russia is very low, in Ukraine low, in Turkey, in Georgia medium, and in Moldova, Romania, and Bulgaria we have high level of security. It's interesting that in the 2013, the picture was a little bit different. So let's have a look. Well, it's not so clear, but I hope it's still visible. So in 2013, the difference was that in Georgia, the level of security was low. In Ukraine, it was medium. What's also interesting is that this index is composed of very many elements, as you can see. And one of the major elements of this index of global peace is index called neighboring country relations. And in 2014, this index of neighboring country relations, for obvious reason, was very low for Russia, very low for Ukraine, low for Azerbaijan and Armenia, and medium for Georgia, for Turkey, and also for Moldova, and very high, which means very good, for Romania and Bulgaria. Let's compare this index to 2011 situation. Then the situation was quite different. If we take neighboring country relations, then Ukraine had very high index, which means good. I'm sorry, not very high, just high index, which means good. Bulgaria and Romania had high, very high index. Turkey high, Russia medium, Georgia had low, Armenia and Azerbaijan very low. I will show you the picture. So it means that from year to year, relations between different Black Sea countries were changing quite quickly. So there is no stability in what relates to peace in the region and in what relates to neighboring country relations. For example, in 2013, Russia and Ukraine had medium value for neighboring country relations, which means that their relations with neighbors were quite good, quite all right. But in 2014, as I mentioned, the situation changed dramatically. And what's important to mention is that this global security index, global peace index, changes for each of the Black Sea countries. And for the last year, we have two situations that need more attention. First is Ukraine. Of course, for Ukraine, there is deterioration for global peace index, and Ukraine rank dropped down by 30 positions. But at the same time, Georgia experienced the most significant increase in peace in the 2014 Global Peace Index compared to all other countries all around the world, which means that in the Black Sea region we had two dramatic changes in the index for Georgia and for Ukraine. The situation became much better for Georgia and much worse for Ukraine. And it's important to note that these changes are related not only to conflicts and not only to relations with other countries. Internal peace sources are also very important. For Georgia, of course, thank you. For Georgia, of course, the improvement related to improvement of relations with, I'm sorry. So in case of Georgia, it was related to improvement of relations with Russia, but at the same time, well, there was a number of changes in domestic politics, for example, number of refugees and displaced persons. So there was a reduction of level of organized conflict in Georgia, and there was a decrease in level of political instability in the government's here in Georgia also benefited from a fall in military expenditure. As to Ukraine, I think that the reasons for a decrease in this index are quite obvious. Okay, let's. So that's the state of peace in the region. Well, let's discuss security issues now. There are quite different definitions of security in Russia and in the West. And I will show you this definition. So Russian definition is related more to threats. Russian definitions of security usually are related to military security and freedom from threats. As to Western definitions, usually they include freedom from threats, values. The values are always present in the Western definition. And let me remind you two more definitions. One is the classic definition of Walter Lippmann. You can see it on your screen. So this is again a definition related to values. And the nation would go to war only when it had to do it because of values. And I suggest you a definition from one of the most famous security textbooks in Russia by Vladimir Kulagin. This textbook is so here you see definition of military security. And in this sense, we can say that Russian and Western definitions vary. And I would also like to remind you about realist school and liberal school of international relations, how they treat security issues. According to realist school, the international system is anarchic, and there is no central authority, there is a self-help system, and to assure sovereignty and survival, defensive military capability. And there is lack of trust in international relations. If we speak about liberal school of international relations, then there is institutionalized greater international through coordination and reciprocity. And liberal school also deals with the question of why the EU and NATO still remain as organizations after the end of the Cold War. And according to liberalism, if NATO and the EU didn't have any values at their basis, it would mean that so far they would have been defeated if at the core of their operation there was not say, pragmatic interests. And these two approaches are very important when we speak about security in the Black Sea regions. There are, of course, various dimensions of security: military, political, economic, societal, environmental, energy security. And all these dimensions are discussed when we read some articles about Black Sea. And there are different levels of security, from individual level to then we go up to societal level, to national, regional, international, and global level. So when we discuss the Black Sea security, we stop at regional level. However, if we look at the definitions from major regional organizations, we will see that they also include there are some threats that may be perceived as threats to societies and threats even to individuals. And of course to nation states. So there are different levels of security. I suggest to look at the main threats as they are defined in the charters or some conceptual documents of different organizations. If we start from the United Nations, from the top level, from the global level, we can look at the document called A More Secure World, Our Shared Responsibility, which was issued in 2004. There are 6 types of threats to international security. War between states, violence within states, then poverty, infectious diseases, environmental degradation, which are obviously threats to individuals and to societies. Then go nuclear, chemical, biological, and radiological weapons, next terrorism, and after that transnational crime. So here we have different approaches, different levels, and different spheres of security. That's at the global level, and then we proceed to regional level, to the Black Sea level, to the organizations that are presented in the Black Sea region and which influence security of the Black Sea region. If we take NATO strategic concept from 2010, what's important to stress is that NATO is defined as a unique community of values. That's from where the document starts. As we saw from the definitions of security, this is a purely Western approach. For Russia, security means something military, something very pragmatic, something based on interests. And that's why for Russia, all cooperation that is organized in the framework of NATO is purely military cooperation. That's why we have some disagreements on the say core tasks of NATO. Russia believes that promotion of democracy shouldn't be probably included into the major goals of NATO. However, if we return to the NATO strategic concept adopted in 2010, on the first place we will see conventional attack from another state or a group of states as the major threat. Then on the second place, proliferation of ballistic missiles and weapons of mass destruction. Next goes terrorism. After that, instability of conflict beyond NATO borders. After that, cyber attacks. Then energy security, vital infrastructure security. Also, what there is in this document, new military technologies that might be dangerous for NATO. And on the last place, something that is new to NATO, environmental and resource constraints that also might be sources of instability. Let's proceed to the European Union and look at the European security strategy adopted in 2003. Here, on the first place, in contrast to NATO, we will see terrorism. So NATO is a military bloc, and they have conventional attacks. For the EU, terrorism is more important. However, on the second place, here we have similarity with NATO. There is proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. And for NATO, that's also the second priority. On the third place, there are regional conflicts. And it could be compared to instability of conflict beyond NATO borders. So this is a similar approach. What's interesting and what's specific to the EU European security strategy? State failure goes next, is one of the major threats. And this is something different from regional conflicts, and in a way it could be somehow related to internal problems mentioned in the UN documents, but still that's something specific to the EU. And on the last place in this strategy, we see organized crime. Another very important security structure in the Black Sea region is the OSCE. And we tend to forget about OSCE when we speak about the Black Sea region. For some reasons, NATO and the EU are always discussed when we speak about security issues in the Black Sea, but OSCE is not always mentioned. OSCE has a strategy to address threats to security and stability in the 21st century, a document adopted in 2003. They describe negative destabilizing consequences of developments that cut across the political, military, economic, and environmental and human dimensions. Major armed conflicts are not seen as highly probable, at least in 2003. But still, interstate or intrastate conflicts are on the first place because OSCE is primarily a security organization. But here, intrastate conflicts are on the same position as interstate conflicts. That's also important. Then goes terrorism. Next goes organized crime. What's specific to the OSCE? After organized crime, they have discrimination and intolerance. Then we have economic factors, environmental threats, and at the end of the list, threats of a politically military nature, like illicit transfer of arms. This is the wide picture of regional security organizations, and as I am giving this lecture from Russia, I will draw your attention to the Russian perceptions of hierarchy of threats that you can see in the Russian foreign policy concept that was adopted in 2013. So here, surprisingly, the list of threats to international security is quite longer compared to lists of international organizations. First goes risk of proliferation of weapons of mass destruction and international terrorism. This is on the first place. And let me remind you that it's not a military doctrine. I'm speaking about concept of foreign policy, which is different. Then, on the second place, there is uncontrolled traffic in arms and combatants. On the third place, radicalization of public sentiment, giving rise to religious extremism and ethnic and interconfessional tensions. Then goes illegal migration. After that, maritime piracy. And next goes a long list of different transnational threats like drug trafficking, corruption, then regional and international conflicts, scarcity of essential resources, demographic problems, global poverty, environmental, sanitary, and epidemiological challenges, climate change, threats to information, and food security. So here you can see a whole range of different threats from almost anything. But compared to threats listed in the documents of regional security organizations, in the Russian foreign policy concept, the majority of threats are related to society, to individuals, and only about a third are related to states. And I think that's an important point that needs to be stressed. And let's now try to use all those security patterns in relation to the Black Sea region. If we look at all the articles that academic articles and practical conferences that you can find online and in your libraries, conferences and workshops that deal with the Black Sea security, I would list the topics that are discussed in the following order. I will show you the picture. So first, what is discussed most often is great power competition. That you can see in every article and every paper on the Black Sea security. Usually it goes along with the discussion of EU and NATO activities in the Black Sea region, and of course when authors discuss EU, they speak about normative power, and if they discuss the Black Sea in relation to NATO expansion, then they discuss military power, military exercises, possibility for military cooperation, but it doesn't go beyond purely military aspects. Then on the third place I would put unresolved conflicts. But usually these unresolved conflicts or frozen conflicts are discussed in relation with great power games in the region. So these two points are interrelated. Energy security is also discussed quite often, but it's I would say discussed more by experts in economics and not in security issues. However, the term energy security is used very often, which means that energy is securitized in this case, and I'm not quite sure that energy should be put in this security basket and not, say, in the basket of economic cooperation in this region. And only on the last place we can see transnational threats like corruption or organized crime. Usually these threats are just mentioned and not discussed in detail. Usually authors just state that this region has mostly weak states that have not completed their transition after the collapse of the Soviet Union and of the socialist system, and it means that there are quite a few problems that the local governments have to address. And usually authors give recommendations like there should be a new collective security agreement signed, or a new comprehensive institution, or a new comprehensive treaty. General recommendations are usually boiled down to the issue of lack of any comprehensive framework, security framework in this region. And the list of the organizations that we discussed is as follows. So usually in relation to the Black Sea, the EU is mentioned, sometimes OSCE, NATO, Black Sea Economic Council, Guam, probably a Community of Democratic Choice, but I have never seen in the articles devoted to the Black Sea another missing element, a Collective Security Treaty Organization. This organization is never discussed when it comes to the Black Sea region and Black Sea security. However, if we look at the map of the Black Sea, we will find that Russia and Armenia are part of this organization, and I'll discuss that later. And there are 3 NATO countries in the region and 2 countries that are members of this Collective Security Treaty Organization. At least it's worth analyzing. And what's funny that if we look at the emblem of NATO and the Collective Security Treaty Organization, they look quite alike. They're similar. Okay, what is this Collective Security Treaty Organization? Here is the list. Okay, how to show it? Okay, this way. Here is the list of members of this organization. So it was launched in 2002, but it's based on the treaty signed in 1992. So currently, 2 Black Sea states are members of this treaty: Armenia and Russia. But from 94 to 99, 2 more Black Sea states were part of this agreement: Georgia and Azerbaijan, that decided to leave this collective security treaty in '99, and they joined Guam, a bloc of states that decided to create this bloc Guam in order to counter Russian influence in the region. So at least historically, collective security treaty and now collective security treaty organization play quite an important role in this region. The Cs2 collective security treaty organization has 2 main areas of cooperation. First, hard security, similar to NATO, collective defense, military technical cooperation, training of personnel, and of course soft security, which is now even more important. It's crisis reaction, it's drug trafficking, illegal migration from third countries, information security is also included. And if we look at the hierarchy of threats that's you can see in the Cs2 Charter adopted in 2002, then of course on the first place you will see external attack, then on the second place terrorism, extremism, drug trafficking, illegal arms trade, transnational organized crime, and illegal migration from third countries. And what is also included, natural and man-made disasters and catastrophes. What this organization has as its instruments. Not many experts know that this organization has actually a lot of instruments to react to different types of crises. In 2001, they created the Collective Rapid Deployment Forces for Central Asia, 4,000 troops. But that's only for Central Asia. They also have 2 regional groups of forces to react to conventional threats like attacks from other states or group of states. So 2 regional groups of forces, the first one Russia, Belarus, and the second one Russia, Armenia. So they have a specific regional group of force, and this is directly related to the Black Sea region. The Cs2 also has the Collective Rapid Reaction Forces, created in 2009. And these forces have 20,000 troops. And their main goal is crisis reaction on the territory of the organization. And what's even more important, the Cs2 has Peacekeeping Forces, created in 2010. And these forces can be deployed not only on the Cs2 territory, they can also be deployed outside Cs2 area of responsibility, but only under the mandate of the UN and at the request of a state that needs this peacekeeping operation. And this UN peacekeeping force has 3,500 troops, so also quite an impressive force. The Cs2 has 3 annual operations. Anti-drug trafficking operation channel since 2003. They also have Operation Illegal that fights illegal migration from third countries, and they have Operation Proxy that is aimed at information security. They close down extremist websites. I mentioned these operations because a lot of Black Sea countries participated as observers in this anti-drug trafficking operation channel. For example, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, let me see, a lot of EU countries participated, like the Baltic states, Poland, Bulgaria, Turkey also participated, even China, Venezuela, and some other countries like Iran, for example. So at the level of cooperation between this organization and different states, there is some knowledge that the Cs2 is an organization that has some viable instruments to fight drug trafficking. And the Cs2 has cooperation with OSCE. It has contacts with OSCE Conflict Prevention Center. Cs2 representatives participate in OSCE annual security review conferences. Cs2 members make joint declarations in the framework of OSCE meetings. And Cs2 also would like to establish relations with NATO, official relations. So they want to sign a treaty, an agreement to show that these two blocs have a lot of things in common and they can cooperate, say, on nuclear security, on drug trafficking, on terrorism, on extremism. So actually there is quite a large list of spheres of joint interests. But NATO is not really willing to establish cooperation with the Cs2 because the Cs2 hasn't had till now any real operations in the sense that it would be a conflict prevention or peacekeeping. I mean, the Cs2, they have a lot of instruments like collective forces, but they have not used them. Although it could be said that until 1993, NATO also didn't use its collective forces. So NATO also for quite a long time was an organization aimed at prevention, and it didn't have to use its collective forces. So the same could be said about the Cs2. My question here would be, why the Cs2 is missing from discussions about Black Sea security? First reason, most obvious one, could be that simply the organization itself, the Cs2, is not really interested in the Black Sea region, because most threats for the Cs2 come from Afghanistan. Of course, the organization is concentrated more on this region. However, for Armenia, it's important to be in this organization because of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, and in case if there is an external threat to Armenia, then at least theoretically the Cs2 might react in this case, although the Cs2 is not really interested in participating in the settlement of Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. And the second reason why the Cs2 is not really discussed in the discussions in the case of Black Sea security, it is lack of common pan-European security architecture. As you remember, I said that most of the recommendations of the authors of articles on Black Sea security are that there should be a comprehensive regional agreement. And as you probably know, in 2008, Russian President Medvedev suggested a draft of a comprehensive European security treaty that would help to include members of all existing security arrangements in one treaty and to create a basis for security cooperation without dividing lines. However, this Russian proposal didn't seem interesting to NATO members, to even to other OSCE members, because they said that we already have the OSCE. Why would we need another European security treaty? Because OSCE is actually the organization, is the structure that is meant to unite different blocks, different countries with different views in order to find common security approaches. And, well, so the right list two possible approaches to that, either non-interest or well, either, let's say, non-interest from the Cs2 or non-interest from other actors in the region. And as an explanation of this situation and a point for further discussion that I suggest for our today's discussion is the concept that I introduce, and I welcome your comments on this concept. I introduce a concept of, okay, like this, that Black Sea region is a region of bridges, because almost all Black Sea countries perceive themselves as bridges. Russia as a bridge between Europe and Asia. Romania and Bulgaria see themselves as bridges for trade and energy cooperation with the EU. And Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey see themselves as bridges of cooperation of other countries with NATO. Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia perceive themselves as bridges between the post-Soviet space and EU plus NATO, so because they are aspiring members of one or the other organization. We can see that Armenia is also trying to balance between its desire to cooperate with the EU and NATO and its cooperation with Russia. Azerbaijan also perceives itself as a kind of a bridge between the post-Soviet space can be excluded from the region, from this region, like, for example, the Cs2. With that, I would like to stop my lecture and proceed to questions. So thank you, and I'm ready to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Yulia. And I ask other universities, as soon as you have questions, please first move your hand because your sound is off. So I will be able to switch on your sound and then you will be able to raise the questions. Okay? So do we have a question from Romania or here from Odessa? Okay, let us start from probably here, and the first question to our lecturer. As you were talking about the different approaches from the Russian purely military perception of the security to the European more soft security issues, how do you think, taking into account the threats and challenges that the Black Sea region had before 2014, let's say, yeah, which approach could be more cooperative for the countries, first of all, for the littoral countries of the Black Sea region?
Okay, thank you, Hannah, for this question. I guess it has an obvious answer, so I don't need to develop this answer very much. Of course, if we speak from point of view of theories, liberalism, liberal approach, which is aimed at the development of values, seems to be more cooperative. And if security is framed only as military security, then it creates some obvious constraints. However, I'm not sure that the answer is that obvious. Probably there are some other implications. So if you separate security and cooperation, then probably it could be easier to develop cooperation in other spheres, or probably even in military spheres. So the fact that Russian definitions of security are strictly military doesn't mean that Russia perceives everything as a threat and well, has only a narrow approach. It simply means that for Russian officials, and especially if we take Russian official documents, for them, cooperation is something really separate. That's one point. And another point that I would like to add and to develop from the point of view of Russian political elites. That's not how I think, but how the current Russian government thinks. And the approach is that even democratic values and even attempts to build democratic community by the European Union and by NATO, even then this quite peaceful, as it is seen from the EU or from NATO, this quite peaceful attempts are seen in Russia as a threat. Why is that? It seems to be a paradox that actually, well, how a democratic community of states can put any threat to anyone. And here we should remember about the democratic peace theory. Democracies do not fight each other. Good, that's good. And for the Black Sea region, for any other region, of course, it's good to have a democratic community of states where democracies peacefully coexist. However, this democratic peace theory says nothing about democracies. So democracies, as we know from the examples of Iraq, of Afghanistan, of Kosovo earlier, and Libya, democracies may first attack non-democracies, of course for liberal purposes, etc. But still, it means that democratic states still can start a conflict or an operation. Of course, from their point of view, it will be for the purpose of promoting human rights, etc. But still, they can be a source of threat. Especially as Russian political elites see it, Russia is not perceived as a democratic country. And it means that from the point of view of NATO and of the EU, Russia can be seen as a threat. And it means that this peaceful democratic community that we see in the framework of NATO or the EU, this peaceful democratic community can be a threat to Russia. So what's the solution? The solution is that I mentioned earlier, comprehensive security arrangements. If Russia excluded from NATO, from the EU, then it feels that it's not in this security community, and it means that Russia feels threatened, at least from the point of view of Russian political elites. And it means that exclusion creates instability. And the Black Sea region is the region of great opportunities, because here we have all those conflicts, all those other threats, and actually, I would subscribe to all those recommendations that other authors give, that we need a comprehensive regional security arrangement that would help us all to be included in this security community, and that would help us to cooperate on some important issues like cybersecurity or extremism, or some issues related to human security. If military security itself is the sphere that now seems critical and very sensitive, the dimensions related to human security are not that developed, and there is not much cooperation on this issue, which means that well, we still really do need more cooperation on some issues like consequences of natural catastrophes or corruption or drug trafficking, and all of the organizations that I mentioned have these priorities in their list of threats. So probably we should start not from the top of the list, like state conflicts or weapons of mass destruction, but probably we should start from the bottom of the list, like human security, and try to build the security community bottom up and not in the other direction. Thank you.
Thank you. I see we have Romania. Yep. Ruxandra.
Yes, can you speak loud, very loud, please?
Yes. How do you see the game of peace in this specific area in the next 5 years?
About the way you see security at the Black Sea in the next 5 years.
Okay, in the next years. Thank you for your question. Well, it's usually difficult to make predictions, and as I demonstrated, if we look at the Global Peace Index, there are quite important changes from year to year. In 2011, there was one situation, and next year the situation was really different. So unfortunately, we have too many threats and levels of threats. So probably there could be some improvements in the sphere of interstate relations, but at the same time some deteriorations in other spheres. So I would say that predictions should be made on each of the dimensions of security. My prediction is that in the sphere of human security, there will be some improvements, and we already see it at the example of Georgia, and I think that other Black Sea states also will continue their transition and will manage to fight some of the threats like corruption or organized crime. But I think that mostly the improvements will be because of national, domestic development. So because of the efforts of national states bordering the Black Sea, but not because of regional cooperation. And as to unresolved conflicts, my guess is that unfortunately these conflicts will remain frozen, but probably the situation will develop in the direction of improvement of neighboring relations, of neighboring countries that are somehow related to frozen conflicts, but the conflicts themselves will remain unresolved. And again, we could see this at the example of Georgia, where the issue of South Ossetia and Abkhazia still remain on the table, but when it comes to economic cooperation, these issues are put aside, and economic cooperation is discussed as quite a separate basket of questions. And of course, it doesn't mean a solution of this conflicts, but still it means some improvement of interstate relations, and I think that it's quite a probable scenario. At the same time, Russia is still worried about NATO enlargement in the Black Sea and NATO military activities. So that's a point where some, say, well, some political disputes may continue because, of course, if Russia is excluded from this processes, if Russia is not part of the European security architecture, then its political elites will feel isolated and will be very cautious about any military activities in the Black Sea. And I think that fortunately or unfortunately, it depends on the point of view, great power politics will still remain the key factor in this region, because Russia is developing its relations with Turkey and is trying to build very close ties, economic and energy, and it means that still there will be some disbalances related to power in the region, and if these bilateral relations remain outside of any institutional frameworks, then they will be perceived as probably more as elements of power politics and as desire to dominate the region, and not as a desire to communicate on an equal basis, on not as a desire to build a security community. So I guess that we shouldn't expect some breakthrough in the sphere of security in the Black Sea, although I think that there will be some improvements related to human security. Thank you.
Great, and we have yet one question from Odessa.
Yeah, thank you very much for your lecture. And I have a question. Like at the beginning of your lecture, we were talking about recommendations, like signing a new comprehensive treaty in the Black Sea region. And my question is, can the transnational threats can be put at the top of the issues of security of the Black Sea region, or such aspects like organized crime, corruption will still remain at the end of this list? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, it would be probably a good idea to do it, to put transnational threats at the basis of this new security arrangement. Although I think it might be difficult unless there are some improvements in military relations. However, well, that's probably a more conventional approach. However, if we look at the example of, let me again refer to Georgia. So we have an unresolved conflict, or well, unresolved for Georgia. Russia officially thinks that the conflict is resolved. However, put aside all these military issues, we still have cooperation. So even if we don't have any improvements in relations between Russia and NATO, probably we could look at the example that I mentioned, and we can simply put aside all our disagreements in the military sphere and start with issues that are really important, like terrorism, extremism, especially this is important if we think about the Islamic State and some other developments in the Middle East. So organized crime is, of course, a very important issue. So I think that this could be possible, and I would welcome such an agreement signed for the cooperation on transnational security threats. What's more, Russian officials, Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs representatives call for such a cooperation. They say that despite all the disagreements that Russia now has with the West, we should still continue business as usual. So if there are some issues where Russia can help, like fight against international terrorism, then Russia is ready and really wants to continue cooperation. And I think that's a very good sign that Russia doesn't want to isolate itself. Russia wants to continue cooperation on the issues where it is still possible. So I would support such an idea. However, I think that most probably this agreement would be difficult to institutionalize. So most probably it will be just a declaration or an agreement without any instruments of reaction. So probably we should think about well, let's say an agreement between different regional organizations on the cooperation on these issues of transnational threats. But now for the coming 5 years, probably it will be a little bit difficult because of the aspects that we all know. So I guess that it's also more an issue that will be resolved in the midterm, not in the short term. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Bucharest, Tbilisi? If no, we would like to thank our lecturer for today, and be aware that the lecture is already available online, so if some of your students were not able to watch it and to participate now, they are able to watch it there at our YouTube channel. And I hope to see all of you in May for one of our last lectures. And thank you, Moscow, for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining our lecture. Thank you.